The desert wind blew hot across the trading post on planet Karth, a dry, forgotten world at the edge of human space. Jack Harlan stood near his rusted cargo hauler, arguing with a loud-mouthed alien merchant named Groth. "I fixed your generator," Jack said, wiping sweat from his face. "We agreed on payment in parts," Groth hissed, shaking his big green head. "No parts, human. Shipment delayed. Pirates everywhere." Jack clenched his jaw, angry, tired, and hungry. "Then what are you paying me with?" he asked. Groth grinned and snapped his claws. "Something better." A cage was dragged out from the shadows, made of scrap metal and powered with weak shock bars. Inside the cage, a girl sat quietly, thin, dirty, with purple skin and long, silver hair that covered half her face. Her wrists were chained, and her bare feet were bruised. "A slave?" Jack said, stepping back. "I don't want this," Groth shrugged. "She's broken, doesn't talk, doesn't fight, useless to me now." He leaned closer and whispered, "But pretty, yes? Keep her or sell her. I don't care." Jack stared at the girl, who didn't move or speak. She looked up only once, and in her eyes, Jack saw something, not fear, not pain, but pride, buried deep beneath all that silence. He looked away. "I don't deal in slaves," he said flatly. Groth chuckled. "Call it a gift." Jack cursed under his breath, but the trader walked away, leaving the cage behind. Other merchants watched with smirks, whispering among themselves. To them, Jack had just received garbage, something worthless, but Jack couldn't just leave her there. She was someone's daughter, someone's sister, maybe even something more. He powered down the shock bars and opened the cage. She didn't run, didn't even flinch, just watched him with tired, sharp eyes. "What's your name?" he asked softly, but she didn't answer. He sighed. "Okay, come on," and helped her to her feet. She was too light, like she hadn't eaten in days. He guided her slowly toward his ship. Inside, he gave her a blanket and some water. She sat on the edge of a crate, still silent, still watching. Her silver hair shimmered under the light, tangled and dull. Jack prepared some food and handed it to her. She stared at the plate, then at him, unsure. "Eat," he said gently. "You're safe now." Slowly, she picked up a piece of bread and began to eat. Small bites, careful and nervous, like she thought it might be a trick. Jack leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He didn't know what to do with her. He wasn't a hero, wasn't a soldier, just a mechanic trying to survive. But something about this girl didn't feel like an accident. Later that night, Jack gave her a sleeping mat and closed the lights. He sat in the cockpit, staring at the stars. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why give me her?" Suddenly, he heard soft footsteps. The girl stood behind him, silent, holding the blanket tight around her. She pointed at the stars, then placed a hand over her chest. Jack blinked. You miss home?" She nodded once, eyes shining with something close to tears. He looked at her, really looked at her. Her features were regal, smooth skin, high cheekbones, a natural grace, even in chains. "Who are you?" Jack whispered, but she only turned and walked back to the cargo bay. Jack didn't sleep much that night. He kept thinking about her, about the way she looked at the stars, and about the strange feeling in his gut that this girl, this so-called slave, wasn't what she seemed. She cost him nothing, but she might end up changing everything. Asterisk. The engine of Jack's cargo ship hummed softly as it moved through cold space. Inside the ship, silence wrapped around them. Like a blanket, the alien girl sat in the corner of the small sleeping bay, still wrapped in the same blanket Jack had given her. She didn't cry, didn't sleep, didn't speak. Jack had named her V, short for Violet Eyes, because that was the only thing she gave him, those quiet, watchful eyes. She never answered questions, never nodded or shook her head. She was just there, like a ghost who didn't know how to live. Jack wasn't used to having passengers. His ship was built for hauling parts, scrap, and sometimes odd jobs for shady traders. But now there was this girl, this stranger, sitting in silence like she had nothing left to give. Tried again the next morning, placing warm food near her. "V," he said, crouching beside her. "Can you understand me?" No answer. "Are you hungry?" Still nothing, he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. She picked up the food slowly, bit by bit, like a wild animal. Careful, suspicious, but never aggressive. When Jack fixed a broken vent, she watched him. When he cleaned his tools, she stared without blinking. But when he came too close, she shrank back, her fingers gripping the blanket tighter. One day, Jack caught her staring at the mirror in the bathroom. She touched her face like she didn't recognize it. Her silver hair was tangled, her cheek bruised, and her eyes tired but full of something deeper, not fear, something else. Jack had seen trauma before: pirates, war orphans, soldiers. But this girl felt different. She didn't act like a slave, even though she had been chained. She acted like someone who once stood tall but had been crushed. That night, Jack set up a small projector and played old Earth music. Soft piano filled the room, and the stars outside blinked like diamonds. He hoped the sound might comfort her. Instead, she curled up in the corner and covered her ears, shaking. He quickly turned it off, his heart sinking. The next day, he found her on the floor near the control room. She was tracing symbols into the dust, strange, elegant lines that looked like royal writing. When Jack approached, she wiped them away and backed off, like she wasn't allowed to show them. "Who are you?" he whispered, more to himself than her. Again, she said nothing. Only her violet eyes answered, and they said, "Don't trust anyone." The silence between them became a language of its own. She didn't need words to show she was alert, intelligent, and watching everything. But there was one moment, just one, that changed something. Jack was working under a console when a toolbox slipped and landed hard on his arm. He shouted in pain, metal digging into his skin. Before he could move, she was there. She didn't speak, but she pulled the toolbox off him with surprising strength. Then she tore a piece of the blanket and wrapped it around his wound. Clumsy, awkward but careful. Jack stared at her, shocked. "Thank you," he said softly. She didn't respond. But for the first time, her hand stopped shaking. Later, she stood by the window, staring at the stars again. She reached up and placed her hand on the glass. Her lips moved, soundlessly. Jack couldn't hear the words, but he knew it was a prayer, a wish, a memory. That night, he locked the cockpit, not because he didn't trust her, but to protect her. Something was wrong, something big. This girl was not just a random slave, thrown away by a traitor. She had value, hidden deep. She was more than what she seemed, and Jack knew that silence was not weakness, it was survival. He had accepted her without knowing who she truly was, but now he was sure she was hiding something that could shake entire worlds, and she still refused to speak. The ship drifted quietly through an asteroid field, its lights dimmed to avoid attention. Jack didn't trust anyone now, not after what he had started to suspect about the girl in his ship. She still hadn't spoken a word, but her silence had begun to scream louder than any voice. Every day she moved a little more freely. She ate without fear, walked with more strength, and began exploring the ship in small circles. But she never left her guard down, not even in sleep. She always kept one eye half open, as if danger waited just outside the walls. Jack was watching her more now, not out of curiosity but out of worry. Something about her didn't make sense. She looked fragile, yes, but she moved like someone trained. Even her silence was not fear, but control. One afternoon, Jack noticed something strange while she was cleaning herself in the ship's small shower room. The bathroom door wasn't locked. She never locked it. She never expected privacy. Jack walked by and caught a glimpse of a mark behind her neck. Not a scar, not a bruise, but a glowing symbol. It pulsed faintly under her skin, like a tattoo made of light, circular in shape, with tiny lines forming a crown around a star. Jack froze. He knew that mark. He ran to his terminal, pulled up an old archive from the Viralian royal data logs. Images loaded slowly, symbols of royal families, nobles, warlords, and there it was, royal crest of the House of Verelten. Status, extinct. Last known heir, Princess Sarava Varelia. Declared dead. 5 years ago during the rebellion, Jack's stomach turned cold. He returned to the shower room, his boots silent. She was already dressed, sitting in the corner again, hugging her knees. He sat in front of her, not close, but close enough to see her face clearly. I saw the mark, he said quietly. She stiffened, not looking at him. I didn't mean to, but I recognized it. Still no words. Jack pulled up the hologram and showed her the symbol from the archives. This is it, isn't it? He asked. That's your family's crest. The girl didn't move for a long time. Then slowly, she reached behind her neck and touched the mark with her fingers. Her hands trembled. She looked up, her violet eyes filled with something new. This time, pain mixed with fire. He took a deep breath. You're her, aren't you? The lost princess. Silence. Then for the first time, she nodded. Once, slow and heavy. Like it hurt to admit it. Jack leaned back against the wall, his head spinning. He had accepted a girl he thought was a slave, someone unwanted and broken. But in truth, he had taken in the most valuable person in the Varelian Empire. She had been hidden, sold, and silenced, and now she was with him, and worse, if others found out, she would be hunted, not to be saved, but to be erased forever. Why? Me? Jack whispered. Why did they give you to me? She finally spoke, her voice cracked, dry like sand. They thought I was already dead inside. Jack stared at her, stunned by how soft and small her voice was. But her words were clear, and her meaning sharp. She had survived betrayals, capture, torture, and slavery. And now, by pure accident or maybe fate, she had ended up in the hands of the only human who didn't want to own her. Jack stood and started sealing the ship's systems. No more stops, he said firmly. No more risks. She looked up at him, confused. He turned back and met her eyes. You're not property, and you're not a princess to me. You're a person, and you're safe here, V. For a second, she looked like she might cry. But she didn't. Instead, she touched her mark again and whispered something in her language. Jack didn't understand the words, but the way she said them, it sounded like a vow asterisk. The stars outside the ship drifted like frozen tears. Inside, Jack sat across from the alien girl. No longer just a slave, no longer just V. She had a name now, a past, and a truth too big to carry alone. Jack gently placed a warm drink in front of her, then sat back. He didn't push her, didn't force her to speak. He only waited, his eyes calm, steady, patient. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice low. My real name is Sarava Varelia, she said. Slowly, daughter of Queen HFY, heir to the Varelian throne. Jack said nothing, letting her continue. She stared at her hands, still marked by faint scars and burn lines. I was 14 when the rebellion came, she said. They blew up our palace, killed my mother. My brothers, her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. They said I died too, that I was lost in the fire. But I lived. She paused again, swallowing hard. Someone inside betrayed us, she whispered. Someone I trusted. He sold me off-world, drugged and chained. Jack's fists clenched slowly, his jaw tight. What kind of monster does that to a child? He muttered. She continued. I woke up in a cage far from home, on a ship full of buyers. They gave me a new name, a number. No one cared who I was, only what I was worth. For years, I was passed from one hand to another, she said, her voice turning cold. Each time I lost more of myself, my language, my hope. But I never forgot the stars. I never forgot who I was. She looked at Jack, eyes filled with the first fire he'd seen in her. Then they brought me to that outpost. They thought I was worthless, too damaged to sell again. So Groth traded me away. Like junk. Jack leaned forward. And they didn't know, none of them knew who you really were. Sarava shook her head. I hid the mark, she said. Covered it with dust, pain, silence. I knew. If they found out I was royal, they'd finish the job. Jack rubbed his face, trying to make sense of it all. You survived years of captivity, and still held on? She didn't nod, didn't smile. I didn't survive, she said. I broke into pieces. I'm only starting to come back now. He stood, pacing. Do you know who betrayed you? Who started the rebellion? Her eyes darkened. Yes, she said. His name is General Varric. My mother's most trusted guardian. He wanted the throne, the power, and he's still out there. Jack's spine stiffened. If what she said was true, then the Varelian Empire was built on blood and lies, and the rightful heir was sitting on his ship with bounty hunters possibly tracking them even now. Sarava stood too, her blanket falling to the floor. She no longer looked like a slave. She stood tall not as a girl, but as a survivor of hell. I don't want the throne, she said. I only want to be free. Jack nodded slowly. Then let's make sure no one ever chains you again, he said. I'm with you now, even if it means going against half the galaxy. She blinked, startled by his promise. No one has ever said that to me, she whispered. Not without expecting something in return. Jack gave a half smile. Well, I'm not like the others. You might be royalty, but to me, you're just V. For the first time. Sarava smiled, just a small curve of her lips. But it was real, and it was hers. In the distance, an alert began to beep. A ship had locked onto them, unknown, fast, and heading their way. Jack's face turned serious. Looks like someone found us. Sarava stepped closer, her voice steady. Then let them come, she said. I'm done running. The alarm kept beeping, cold and sharp in the quiet ship. Jack checked the radar, his eyes narrowing. One ship, maybe two, moving fast and closing in from the far side of the asteroid field. He tapped the controls, running a scan. No ID, no signals, just pure shadow. He didn't need confirmation. They weren't merchants, weren't travelers. They were hunters. Behind him, Sarava stood still, staring at the blinking red lights. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but memory. I know that formation, she whispered. Elite trackers from the old Royal Guard. Now under Varric, Jack cursed under his breath. They found you. She nodded, her voice dry. They always find me. Sooner or later, he turned, grabbed his jacket, and tossed her a compact blaster. Not this time, he said. We're not going down easy. The ship rumbled as Jack steered it hard, weaving through broken rocks and frozen debris. Sarava held onto the frame, steady on her feet. Her mind raced, remembering old escape drills, forgotten codes, and secret routes her mother once showed her. They won't stop, she said quietly. They'll disable the ship, board it, take me alive. Jack looked at her. Why alive? Sarava's eyes darkened. Because killing me would make them martyrs, she said. But parading me as a prisoner, that would crush hope. Jack didn't speak, but his jaw tightened. He didn't care about politics or empires. But no one was going to put her in chains again. The enemy ships closed the distance, sending a warning blast near their tail. Jack spun the ship downward, diving into a thick asteroid cloud. Hold on, he shouted. The ship shook violently, metal scraping against stone, sparks flying. Inside, Sarava kept her balance with surprising ease, even after all the years of being chained. Her body still remembered how to move. They'll try to jam our signal, she said. But there's a relay point near Sector Delta 7. Jack nodded. Good, we head there, but we need a distraction. He triggered a decoy pod from under the hull. It burst into a cloud of heat signatures, floating metal, and false signals. One enemy ship turned, just as planned, but the other one stayed locked, pushing harder, faster. It fired a laser blast, striking their rear engine. Sparks flew, panels blew out, and the ship tilted violently. Jack grabbed the controls, steadying the ship with one hand while sealing off the damaged section with the other. We're hit, he shouted, losing power fast. Sarava grabbed the toolkit and rushed to the back. I can help. she said, already pulling open a maintenance hatch. Jack blinked. You know this tech? She smirked slightly. I designed this tech. Varelian ships are older cousins to this model. Jack raised a brow. Of course they are, while he steered. She rerouted the power manually, sparks flying around her as she connected wires. With bare hands, the engine hummed again, weak but alive. Jack grinned. Remind me to never underestimate you again. She looked at him, serious. Don't ever underestimate what's been stolen from me. The ship burst out of the asteroid cloud just in time to reach the relay station, a small satellite hidden between space junk. Jack opened a secure channel, encrypted and old school. He sent a short message: coordinates, danger code, and one word: heir. Sarava watched silently, her hands still shaking slightly from the repair job. What if no one answers? She asked. Jack replied. Then we make our own answers. Suddenly, the remaining enemy ship fired again, this time aiming to cripple them fully. Jack triggered the ship's last shield charge and spun upward, barely avoiding the hit. I have a plan, Jack said, but it's stupid. I like stupid, Sarava said, standing beside him. Blaster ready. Stupid saved my life. He dove straight toward a nearby moon's surface, fast and low. The enemy followed, pushing their ship to match speed. Jack flew through a narrow canyon, too tight for both ships. Brace yourself, he shouted. He flipped the ship at the last second and released a mining charge. Barely armed, it hit the canyon wall, exploding just enough to collapse rock between them and the pursuer. The enemy ship crashed into the wall with a flash of flame. Sarava clutched the edge of the console, panting. They're down, she said, her voice shaky. For now, Jack didn't celebrate. He checked systems. Most were damaged, engines overheating, shields gone. They had survived the first attack, but the message was sent. Now others knew the heir was alive, and Sarava knew this was only the beginning. Asterisk smoke still curled from damaged vents, and warning lights blinked across the cockpit. Jack's knuckles were white on the controls, his face pale and tired. Behind him, Sarava stood like a statue, staring at the approaching moon. It wasn't just a rock, it was a secret, a hidden place, her last chance to find people who still remembered her name. Are you sure this is the right place? Jack asked, glancing back. She nodded once, her voice low. This was one of my mother's fallback bases. If anyone from the old court survived, they'll be here. The moon was gray, covered in dust storms and shadows, but deep under its surface, carved into rock and metal, was a base, an old royal bunker powered by silence and fear. As they landed, the ship groaned, steam hissing from broken pipes. Jack opened the hatch slowly, stepping out first with his blaster ready. Sarava followed behind him, her silver hair tied back, her face calm but unreadable. They walked down a long tunnel lit with blue emergency lights. The silence was heavy, pressing on their skin like cold fog. Then the doors opened. A small group stood inside, humans, aliens, older soldiers in faded armor. At first, no one moved. Then one of them stepped forward, eyes wide, lips trembling. By the stars, the man whispered, falling to one knee. The High Star. She lives. One by one, the others dropped to their knees, heads bowed. Some wept, others whispered her name. But Sarava didn't move. She didn't smile, didn't cry. She only whispered, I'm not that girl anymore. Jack stood beside her, watching carefully. He saw the way they looked at her, not with pity, but with desperate hope. The leader of the group, an old woman with robotic legs and a scar across her cheek, stepped forward. We waited 5 years, she said, hoping the flame wasn't truly gone. I'm not here to rule, Sarava said softly. I'm here because they're still hunting me. The old woman nodded. Varrock has claimed your throne, poisoned the people with lies. He says the royal bloodline was weak. That peace comes from control, and yet you kept this place alive? Jack asked, raising a brow. The woman looked at him, eyes sharp, because one day we knew someone would come to light the signal again. Sarava looked around, walls covered in old banners, dusty weapons, data terminals still warm. This place was a tomb of the past waiting for breath. Do they still believe in me? She asked, almost to herself. The woman's voice cracked. They never stopped. Jack watched her carefully. This girl, this woman, she wasn't just a survivor now. She was a symbol, a choice. But Sarava looked down at her hands. They remember a girl who wore silk and jewels, she said. Not the one who bled in cages. Maybe, the woman said. But it's the girl who bled that we need now. They took her deeper into the base where old advisors gathered, where messages waited. And there, in the command chamber, a map showed the galaxy's bleeding corners. Worlds enslaved, fleets built under fear. Freedom hunted like prey. Jack stood to the side as Sarava took it all in. He could see the battle inside her eyes. One part wanted to run, to leave the past behind, to live free with no crown. The other part wanted justice, not revenge, but a voice loud enough to shake the stars. Do I still have a choice? She asked Jack that night, sitting beside him under an artificial sky in the base's garden chamber. He didn't look at her, just leaned back and said, "You always did." She turned her head, watching him carefully. "I never thanked you," she whispered. "You don't have to," Jack said. "But if you do stand up again, don't do it for them. Do it because you want to." Sarava was silent for a while, then stood and looked out at the stars above the domed ceiling. "I don't want a throne," she said. "I want to tear down the chains they built. The ones I wore." Jack smiled slightly. "That's a better reason than any crown." At the center of the base, the old banner of House Varelia was raised again. Not for ceremony, but for warning. The princess was alive, and she would not hide anymore. The hall inside the old Varelian base was filled with light for the first time in years. The royal crest hung high, clean and whole again. Soldiers stood lined up in armor that didn't shine, but their eyes did. They were ready, waiting for her answer. Sarava Varelia stood in the center, wearing a robe of deep violet, her silver hair braided behind her. Her face was calm, strong, but her heart beat like thunder. A message had come through, across 3 systems. All eyes were rising, people who had suffered under Varroc's rule. They had heard the signal, the name, the impossible truth. The princess lived, and now they wanted her to lead, to be their star again, to take back the throne and rebuild the empire her mother had once ruled with grace. But Sarava hesitated, not because she was afraid, she had already faced fear and survived it, but because she knew what came with crowns, expectations, blood, and sacrifice. She had lost her freedom once. She didn't want to lose it again. This time, to duty. Jack stood off to the side, leaning against a stone column. He didn't speak, didn't interfere, but inside, a quiet storm brewed. He had watched her rise again. He had seen her heal, step by step, scar by scar. He knew she could lead, but would it crush her soul again? Sarava turned toward the council and spoke, her voice steady. "I was born a princess," she said, "but I became something else. Something stronger. I was broken, sold, forgotten, and yet, a human. One man treated me like I mattered, not because of my name, but because of who I was." She paused, looking at Jack. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the hall fell silent. Every soldier, every council member felt the shift. Sarava continued, "You asked me to take the throne, to become your symbol again. But I say this, I will not be a symbol. I will be a voice, a guide, but I will never sit on a golden chair while others bleed." Gasps echoed in the hall, but Sarava raised her hand. "I will fight with you, walk beside you. But the crown belongs to the people, now, not to a single bloodline." Then she turned fully to Jack and walked across the hall, slowly, but without hesitation. When she reached him, she took his hand. "I choose this," she said quietly. "Not power, not a palace, but a life where I can laugh, breathe, and never feel afraid to sleep." Jack didn't speak. His eyes said everything. And for the first time in years, Sarava smiled freely. The crowd didn't cheer, they stood quietly, but it was the kind of silence that meant respect, not confusion. A few nodded, some bowed, and one soldier whispered, "She chose to live." In the weeks that followed, Sarava helped organize rebel fleets. She trained pilots, passed out food, repaired old ships. She was no longer a missing royal. She was a leader of people, a symbol of survival, and Jack stayed at her side. Not as a protector, not as a servant, but as her partner. One night, sitting on a balcony above the stars, Jack looked at her and asked, "Do you miss it? The palace? The old life?" Sarava leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "I don't miss the walls or the crowns. I miss my mother's voice, but I think I found a new one." He smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "You don't need a throne, V. You were born to shine without it." And far away, in the darkness, the empire stirred, not out of fear of a returning queen, but out of hope for the girl who chose love and made the stars believe again.